My name is Jacqueline Darnall. I'm 45 years old. Last month, my parents walked uninvited into an art gallery at the University of Southern Maine. They hadn't called me in 6 years. Not when my husband died. Not when I was left raising a nonverbal autistic son alone. Not once. But when my son's painting sold at auction for $3 million, they suddenly remembered they had a daughter. They came smiling, expecting reconciliation, a photograph, maybe a share of the money, a chance to stand beside the prodigy grandson they'd never bothered to meet. What they didn't know was that I had prepared something for that night, a dedication, a gift, a permanent record of who stood by us and who didn't. And when the curator read those words aloud in front of their colleagues and friends, the silence that followed was louder than anything I could have said. To understand why, we need to go back 7 years. July 16th, 2018. I was shelving returns at the Riverton Branch Library where I worked part-time. It was the kind of morning where nothing feels significant. Restocking the biographies, checking in overdue cookbooks, making small talk with Mrs. Chen about her grandson's baseball team. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Chris's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. He knew I couldn't take personal calls during my shift, but something in the double buzz, urgent, insistent, made me step into the break room. "Jackie, I need you to come home, now." His voice was shaking. Chris never shook. "What's wrong? Is Julian okay?" "Julian's fine. I need you to come home." I found him on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later. The towel pressed against his side was soaked through with something that wasn't water. Maine Medical Center, room 4C. Green vinyl chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. Julian in the hallway, organizing and reorganizing the spare hospital bracelet the nurse had given him, arranging the letters by alphabetical order, then by color of ink. Dr. Patricia Vance didn't waste time on comfort words. "The imaging shows a mass in the pancreas. Given the size and location, we're looking at stage 4 pancreatic cancer. If we'd caught it 6 months ago." She paused, not for effect, because there was no good way to finish that sentence. "At this point, we're looking at palliative options, chemotherapy to extend time, manage pain. But I need you to understand, we're talking about months, not years." Chris squeezed my hand so hard I felt the bones shift. "How many months?" I asked. 6, maybe less. I'm sorry." Julian was 12 years old. He'd already lost his ability to speak to anyone outside our immediate family. He organized his world by color and texture and routine because that was the only way he could make sense of it. And now I had to figure out how to tell him his father was dying. I didn't have an answer for that. I'm not sure I ever did. The billing coordinator caught us in the hallway on our way out. "We can set up a payment plan, but the first infusion requires $4,200 up front. Insurance covers 80%, but your out-of-pocket for the initial treatment is due by Friday." Chris was a high school history teacher. Base salary, $51,000 a year. I made $28,000 part-time at the library. We had $3,847 in our checking account. I called my parents that night. It was the first time I'd asked them for money in 15 years, since right after college, when I'd needed help with a security deposit. They'd sent a check then, with a note. "This is the last time. We raised you to be self-sufficient." My father answered on the fourth ring. I could hear CNN in the background. "Dad, it's me. Chris is... He's sick. Really sick. Cancer. We need help with the medical bills." Silence. Then, "Jacqueline, your mother and I are in a critical phase right now. This is the year my manuscript goes to press. I'm on sabbatical, and every moment counts. Surely Chris's parents can help." "They live on a mail carrier's pension, Dad. They barely..." "Then this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate the resilience and independence we worked so hard to instill. You're a capable woman. You'll figure it out." He hung up before I could tell him Chris's parents lived on $43,000 a year. Before I could tell him we'd maxed out our credit card on the first ER visit. Before I could tell him I was terrified. It was 11:34 p.m. Chris was downstairs vomiting from the first round of chemo. Julian was asleep in the next room, his collection of seashells organized by gradient on the shelf above his bed. And my father had just told me I was on my own. Chris went back to work on September 4th. If I stop being a teacher, I'm just a dying man, he told me. I need to be more than that for Julian. He taught 4 classes at Deering High School, 89 students total. American history, AP government, 2 sections of world cultures. None of them knew their teacher was on borrowed time. He wrote lesson plans from the hospital bed during infusion days, graded essays while the anti-nausea meds kicked in. By October, he couldn't stand for full periods. He brought a stool to the front of the classroom, taught sitting down, made jokes about getting old. By November, he couldn't drive himself. I took morning shifts at the library, picked him up at 2:30, brought him home to sleep for 3 hours before Julian got off the bus. The school didn't know what they'd do when he couldn't come back. Neither did we. Julian was 12, autistic level 2, which meant he needed significant support. He'd been mostly nonverbal since age 4, though he could speak when he felt safe, just not to teachers, not to therapists, not to strangers. He didn't ask about the hospital visits, didn't ask why Dad slept so much, but he knew. I found him in the kitchen one morning in November, organizing Chris's pill bottles on the counter. 47 bottles, prescriptions for pain, nausea, anxiety, supplements the oncologist said might help. Julian had arranged them by color, darkest to lightest. "Julian, what are you doing?" He didn't look up. "Dad's colors are changing. They used to be blue-green, now they're gray-brown." Julian saw emotions as colors. I'd learned that from his art therapist years ago. He experienced the world through a sensory lens most people couldn't comprehend. Sounds had textures, emotions had hues, and somehow he could track the progression of his father's illness through a spectrum only he could see. The art therapist said Julian was processing grief the only way he knew how. I wondered if he understood his father was dying. I wondered if, in some ways, he understood it better than I did. December 28th. Chris had been strong enough that morning to suggest a walk, just the 3 of us, down to the Eastern Promenade. It was 19 degrees, the kind of cold that burns your lungs. Julian bundled up in his blue parka, the one with the hood he could pull down over his ears when the wind got too loud. Chris moved slowly, one hand on my arm for balance, the other reaching for Julian's hand. We watched the sunset at 4:47 p.m., orange and pink bleeding into purple over Casco Bay. Chris crouched down. It took him a full minute to lower himself to Julian's height, and looked at our son. "Julian, when I'm gone, I need you to take care of your colors. Don't let anyone tell you they're wrong. Don't let anyone make you feel like the way you see the world is broken. It's not broken. It's yours." Julian stared at the horizon, didn't respond, but his hand tightened around Chris's, and he didn't let go the entire walk home. Chris cried on the way back. Julian pretended not to notice, the way he always did when emotions got too loud. But his hand never let go. I think about that walk a lot, the last time the 3 of us were just us. Arthur and Rosemary, Chris's parents, showed up on January 8th without calling first. Rosemary knocked on the door at 11 p.m., carrying 2 casserole dishes and a duffel bag. "We're here, for as long as you need." They set up camp in the living room, Arthur on the couch, Rosemary in the recliner. The hospice nurse came every 2 hours to check vitals, adjust the morphine drip. At 4:32 in the morning on January 9th, 2019, the breathing stopped. Julian was asleep in the next room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Chris's left hand. Arthur held his right. Rosemary stood at the foot of the bed with her hand on my shoulder. My parents hadn't called in 3 months, but my in-laws were the ones holding my hands when my husband stopped breathing. The funeral was scheduled for January 14th. Arthur and Rosemary offered their house immediately. You can't stay here, Rosemary said, looking around our rental, the two-bedroom apartment we'd been in for 6 years, the place where everything smelled like medical equipment and grief. Come stay with us. We'll figure out the rest later. I almost said yes. But their house was small, just 2 bedrooms, and I needed my parents. I needed the people who'd raised me to show up and tell me I wasn't alone. So I sent the email. Subject: housing request. Mom and Dad, Chris is gone. Julian and I need family right now. Can we stay with you for 6 months while I figure things out? I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't know where else to turn. I sent it at 11:34 p.m. on January 11th. The read receipt came back at 7:02 a.m. on January 12th. The response came at 9:15 a.m. from my father. Subject line: housing request. I still have it, printed out, in a folder in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out just to remind myself I didn't imagine it. Dear Jacqueline, your mother and I have discussed your situation at length. While we certainly sympathize with your loss, we believe this moment presents an opportunity for you to demonstrate the resilience and independence we work to instill in you throughout your upbringing. As you know, I am on sabbatical this year to complete my manuscript, which is under contract with the press. Your mother is in the midst of curating a major exhibition at the museum. These are commitments we cannot defer. Additionally, we have made a significant financial investment in your brother Andrew's startup venture. Our resources are committed for the foreseeable future. We believe Arthur and Rosemary, as Chris's parents, are better positioned to provide the immediate support you require. This is, after all, their loss as well. We trust you will navigate this challenge with the strength of character we have always seen in you. E. Ashford, Ph.D. C.C. Constance Ashford. 247 words, signed with his credentials. Not Dad, not Love, not even Sincerely, just his title. There was no acknowledgement of Julian, no mention of their grandson who'd just lost his father. No, we're sorry, or we wish we could help. Just a professionally worded rejection, copied to my mother, who apparently didn't have anything to add. I read it 3 times. Then I called Arthur. "We're on our way," he said, before I'd even explained. They arrived 2 hours later. Arthur carried boxes from his truck, extra linens, a space heater for the spare bedroom. Rosemary started packing up our kitchen. "Your family," Arthur said when I tried to thank him. "Family doesn't turn away family." Their house was at 67 Bayview Terrace, 980 square feet, built in 1953, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. They'd paid off the mortgage in 2004 after 40 years of payments. They gave us the master bedroom, moved themselves into the sunroom, a converted porch with windows that rattled in the wind and heat that barely worked. They were living on $43,000 a year, Arthur's mail carrier pension and Rosemary's income from selling handmade quilts on Etsy. I was bringing medical debt and a grieving autistic child who had meltdowns when his routine changed. They never hesitated, not once. Julian had a meltdown every other day for the first month. New house, new sounds, new smells. The neighbor's dog barked at 6:15 a.m. every morning, and Julian couldn't handle the unpredictability. He'd cover his ears and rock in the corner of the bedroom until the barking stopped. Arthur built him a shelf unit, 8 color-coded bins for Julian's collections. Seashells in the blue bin, smooth stones in the gray, bottle caps organized by size in the green. Rosemary created a sensory corner in the living room. Weighted blanket, noise-canceling headphones, a basket of fidget toys she'd ordered with her Etsy money. "Julian needs predictability," Rosemary explained to me one morning, setting up the breakfast routine. "If we keep breakfast at 7:15 every morning and his seashells on this shelf, he'll adjust." By March, the meltdowns were down to twice a week. By April, Julian had started arranging Arthur's mail by color when it came through the slot. Arthur never complained about the noise. Not when Julian paced the hallway at 2 a.m., not when he had a meltdown in the grocery store, Not when he accidentally broke one of Rosemary's favorite mugs during a particularly bad sensory overload. "He's processing," Arthur would say. "We've got time." I took a part-time bookkeeping job that let me work from home, 20 hours a week, $2,100 a month. I gave Arthur and Rosemary $800 for groceries and utilities, paid $300 a month toward the medical debt, $43,680 total, after insurance and Chris's small life insurance policy covered what they could. By April, the balance was down to $41,880. Arthur refused to take more money. "We don't need rent, Jackie. We're managing." They weren't managing. Not really. I found out later, years later, that they'd been skipping medications to save money. That Rosemary had stopped going to her annual checkup because the copay was too high. That Arthur had quietly taken out a small loan to cover the property taxes they were struggling with. But they never told me. Never asked for help. They just kept showing up. Kept making breakfast at 7:15. Kept building Julian shelves. The library called in June to offer me a full-time position with benefits. I turned it down. Julian needed me home by 3 p.m. when his special education bus dropped him off. Needed the routine. Needed the predictability. Some things matter more than money. Rosemary had been selling handmade quilts on Etsy for 3 years. She made about $800 a month, enough for her craft supplies and a little extra. I'd worked in a library. I knew how to photograph books to make them look appealing. I figured quilts couldn't be that different. "Let me take pictures of your work," I told her one afternoon. "I think we can do better than phone photos." We spent a Saturday staging her quilts, draping them over the porch railing with the ocean in the background, folding them on a vintage chair Arthur had found at a yard sale, arranging them in natural light. The new photos went up on Monday. By Friday, she'd sold 3 quilts. By the end of May, she'd sold 23, a new record. Revenue jumped from $800 to $1,650 a month. "Jackie, you have an eye for this," Rosemary said, scrolling through her shop analytics. "These photos make my quilts look like art." Arthur started taking handyman jobs on Saturdays. Fixing decks, repairing fences, installing shelves. An extra $400 or $500 a month. None of us said it out loud, but we all knew we were supporting each other, filling in the gaps, making it work because we had to, because that's what family does. The school counselor emailed me in September. Subject: Concerns about Julian. "Mrs. Darnall, Julian has been drawing during every free moment, before class, during lunch, in the resource room. The images are concerning. Very dark colors, chaotic patterns. Has something happened at home that we should know about?" I stared at the email for a long time. Something had happened. Julian's father had died. But I'd told the school that in February, they'd sent a card, offered counseling. Julian had refused to talk to the counselor, so they dropped it. Now they were concerned because he was drawing. I wanted to write back. He's processing grief the only way he knows how. Leave him alone. Instead, I wrote, "Thank you for your concern. We're working with his therapist. Please continue to allow him access to art materials." Julian had filled 14 sketchbooks since Chris died. All black, brown, gray, chaotic swirls, no recognizable shapes, just grief, made visible. Rosemary found the sketchbook in September. Julian had left it open on the kitchen table, page 47, a drawing that was different from the others. "Jackie, come look at this." It wasn't chaotic, it was layered, carefully layered, blue-green at the edges, fading through a dozen shades into gray-brown at the center. "I think this is Chris," Rosemary whispered. It wasn't a portrait. There was no face, no body, no recognizable human form, but it was Chris. The exact color progression Julian had described months ago. Blue-green fading to gray-brown. He'd drawn his father's dying in color. And somehow, in translating grief into gradients, he'd created something beautiful. "What if it's not just therapy?" Rosemary asked Arthur one night, after Julian had gone to bed. What if he's actually talented? She'd been researching art therapy for autistic children, found articles about savant artists, about autistic painters who saw the world in ways neurotypical people couldn't access. In October, she used her Etsy money to buy Julian a real canvas, 16 by 20 inches, pre-primed, basic acrylic paints from Blick Art. Total cost, $47. She set it up on the kitchen table without saying anything, just left it there with a note, for Julian. No rules, just paint. He touched the blank canvas for 20 minutes before making the first mark. When he didn't stop for 6 hours. I checked out the maximum number of books the library allowed, 50 at a time, using my staff privileges. Rothko, The Late Works, Kandinsky, Compositions, Abstract Expressionism, A Critical Record, Color Theory for Artists. Julian studied them like textbooks. Sat on the floor of the living room with books spread around him in a semicircle, organized by color of the cover, then by size, then by subject. "Mom, Rothko saw music," he said one afternoon, a rare moment of unprompted speech. "I see feelings. Is that the same?" "I think it's better," I told him. The children's librarian noticed after the third cycle. "Your son is checking out graduate-level art theory. How old is he?" 13. Remarkable. Every 3 weeks, I'd return 50 books and check out 50 more. Julian absorbed them. Didn't copy the techniques. He couldn't follow instructions in that literal way. The PDA made him shut down under direct demands. But he absorbed the concepts. Let them filter through whatever unique neurological process turned emotions into color in his mind. And then he painted. March 2020, COVID lockdown. For most people, it was a nightmare. For Julian, it was structure. No school, no unpredictable social demands, no fluorescent lights or cafeteria noise, just home, just routine, just art. He watched YouTube tutorials 8 hours a day, abstract painting techniques, color mixing, layering, texture. He filled 12 sketchbooks between March and June. I found a comment he'd left on one of the tutorial videos. "This technique helps me paint what sadness looks like." "Thank you." The channel owner had responded, "Please share your work. I'd love to see it." Julian never did. He didn't paint for recognition. He painted because his brain required it the way other people require sleep. Arthur built him an easel from scrap lumber he'd salvaged from a job site, sanded it smooth, stained it a warm honey color. Julian cried when he saw it. One of 3 times I'd seen him cry since Chris died. He didn't say thank you. He rarely used those exact words. But he touched the wood carefully, tracing the grain with his fingers, and then he set up his first real canvas on it. That painting, untitled, 18 by 24 inches, is still hanging in my bedroom. Canvas and paint are expensive. Professional-grade acrylic, $12 to $18 per tube. Canvas, $15 to $40 depending on size. Brushes, mediums, varnishes, it added up fast. I cut my medical debt payment from $300 to $100 a month, took the extra $200 and made it Julian's art budget. Arthur started haunting the sale bins at Utrecht Art Supplies in Portland. "Got him 12 tubes of professional-grade acrylic for $63, he announced one Saturday, triumphant. Closeout sale, colors he doesn't even have yet." By December 2020, Julian had completed 8 finished paintings. We stacked them in the bedroom we shared, Julian and me in the master bedroom. Arthur and Rosemary had given up. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. sometimes and find Julian sitting on the floor staring at them, rearranging them by what he called emotional temperature. I didn't understand the system, but I trusted it. March 13th, 2021, Monument Square Farmers Market. Rosemary had the idea to rent a booth, $25. We displayed 6 of Julian's paintings on a folding table, propped up against stacks of her quilts. I sat in a folding chair, trying not to hope too hard that someone would notice. At 11:30, a woman stopped. 70s, silver hair in a messy bun, paint-stained jeans. She stared at Julian's paintings for a full minute without speaking. Then she crouched down in front of Julian, who was sitting on the ground organizing smooth stones he'd found in the parking lot. "Who painted these?" Julian didn't answer. Eye contact with strangers was impossible for him. "My son did," I said. "They're extraordinary." She looked at me. "I'm Iris Callahan. I used to paint in New York. Stopped 20 years ago, but these—" She gestured at the paintings. "These remind me why I started." She pulled out a business card, wrote her cell number on the back. "I don't teach, I witness. If your son would let me witness him paint, I'd be honored." Julian didn't look up from his stones, but his hands stopped moving. He was listening. Iris's studio was at 1847 Congress Street, Unit 4B, a converted warehouse space with north-facing windows and concrete floors. "Thursdays, 2 to 5, she said when I called her that night. "No charge, no expectations. If he wants to paint, he paints. If he wants to sit and stare at the wall, he can do that too. I'm not doing this for him, I'm doing it for me. Your son reminded me what art is supposed to feel like." Arthur drove Julian every Thursday. Rosemary packed snacks, the specific ones Julian could tolerate, the textures that didn't trigger sensory overload, fruit pouches, string cheese, pretzels in a sealed bag. I wondered sometimes if my parents even knew what foods Julian could eat, if they'd ever asked about his routines, his needs, his world. But I already knew the answer to that. The first card came in December 2019. Pre-printed message, wishing you peace in the new year. Printed signature, the Ashfords. No handwritten note, no mention of Chris, no acknowledgement that their daughter had just buried her husband, no question about their grandson. Just a generic card from the museum gift shop where my mother worked. I put it in a drawer. The second card came in 2020. Identical design, same printed signature. The third came in 2021. In 2022, no card came at all. I didn't notice until February. And when I realized it, I felt nothing. They'd made their choice. I'd made mine. I didn't block my parents on Facebook. I probably should have. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being their daughter, kept checking. Edmund's book was published in May 2021. Discourse and Democracy, Deliberation in the Public Sphere. Hardcover, $34.95. The acknowledgments page thanked Andrew, my brother, for intellectual curiosity that makes our family proud. I got one sentence buried in the middle, and to Jacqueline, for her early support. My early support, as if I'd contributed a proofread and nothing more. Andrew got a paragraph. I got erased. Julian didn't exist. Constance curated exhibitions at the Portland Museum of Art. I saw the announcements, saw her quoted in the Portland Press Herald, saw her attending galas and photos tagged by the museum's social media. Not once did she mention having a grandson. Not once did she acknowledge that her daughter was raising an autistic child alone. They had lives, full public, accomplished lives. We just weren't in them. July 19th, 2022, 2:34 in the afternoon. I took Julian to the Portland Museum of Art. Free admission for residents on Friday afternoons. He liked the European gallery. Something about the symmetry of the frames. I was standing in front of a Monet when I saw her. My mother. 40 feet away, talking to a colleague. Our eyes met. 3 seconds. I counted. Then she turned to the man next to her and laughed at something he'd said. Didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me at all. I stood there holding Julian's hand. He was 16, non-verbal in public, stimming with the museum map they'd given him at the front desk, folding and unfolding it in a specific pattern. She never looked back. November 2022. Julian's first group show. Space Gallery in Portland. A small contemporary art space that featured emerging artists. Julian's painting, Gradient Number 7, sold for $350. Arthur and Rosemary framed the check, not because we needed the money, because someone had believed in their grandson enough to pay for his work. I drafted a text to my parents. Your grandson is in a real gallery. Thought you'd want to know. I deleted it. May 2023. Meridian Gallery in Boston offered Julian representation. 3-year contract. The gallery owner, Diane Hu, had one condition. Julian can refuse any commission, any deadline, any demand. If this is going to work, we need to respect his process. She understood the PDA before I'd even explained it. September 2024. New England Emerging Artist Prize. $15,000. Julian didn't attend the ceremony at the Boston ICA. 340 people, speeches, applause. It would have been sensory hell. Arthur and Rosemary accepted the award on his behalf. The local news covered it. Portland Press Herald. Portland Monthly. My parents' friends must have seen it. They never called. 5 years. Not one phone call, not one visit, not one, "How is Julian doing?" Just silence. And I realized I didn't need them to care anymore. I'd stopped waiting. Diane Hu had been running Meridian Gallery for 30 years. She'd represented artists who'd gone on to major museums, whose work sold for 6 figures. When she first saw Julian's paintings, the ones Iris had quietly submitted without telling us, she called me directly. "I need to meet him." "He doesn't do meetings," I said. "He has pathological demand avoidance. If he feels pressured, then I won't pressure him. I'll come to him." She drove to Portland in May 2023. Met Julian in Iris's studio. Didn't ask him to explain his work. Didn't ask him to perform or prove anything. Just looked at the paintings for 20 minutes in silence. Then she turned to me. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never seen color depth like this from anyone, let alone a 17-year-old. I'd like to represent him." The contract had one clause that mattered more than all the others combined. The artist reserves the right to refuse any commission, deadline, or exhibition requirement without penalty. Diane understood. Some artists need deadlines to create. Julian needed freedom. Iris submitted Julian's portfolio to the New England Emerging Artist Prize in June 2024. She didn't tell him. Didn't tell me. "If he knows there's a deadline, he'll shut down," she explained later. So I just did it quietly. The notification came in September. Julian Bennett had won $15,000. Recognition from the Boston Institute of Contemporary Art. The award ceremony was September 21st. 340 attendees, speeches, press. Julian stayed home. "I can't," he said simply. "Too many people, too much noise. You go. Tell me what color the room is after." Arthur and Rosemary went, wore their best clothes. Arthur in a suit jacket he'd owned for 30 years, Rosemary in a dress she'd made herself. When the presenter announced Julian's name, they stood together to accept. "Our grandson is an extraordinary artist," Arthur said into the microphone, hands shaking. "And we're honored to be his family." The room applauded. I watched the video later, sent by a friend who'd been there. Arthur and Rosemary looked so proud, so completely, radiantly proud. I thought about my parents, who'd never once asked to see Julian's work, and I felt nothing but peace. Julian started the painting in January 2024. 72 by 96 inches, museum scale, mixed media, acrylic, oil pastels, charcoal, layers of texture built up over months. He worked on it obsessively. 3 hours a day, sometimes 4. Never rushed, never forced. Iris counted the layers. 119. Individual layers of color, each one transparent enough to let the ones beneath show through. The materials alone cost $890. In August, he set down his brush and stepped back. "This is what it looked like when Dad's colors stopped," he told Iris. She cried when she saw it finished. "This needs to be in a museum," she said. "But first, it needs to be seen." Diane agreed. "I'm calling Beacon House Auctions." September 18th, 2025. a producer from NPR's All Things Considered called Diane's Gallery. We want to do a story about Julian Bennett, the autistic artist who paints emotions. Can we interview him? He doesn't do interviews, Diane said. Can we interview his mother? They sent a reporter to Portland. We sat in Iris's studio for 90 minutes. I told her about Chris, about Julian, about the colors. The segment aired on a Thursday, 7 minutes, 2.1 million listeners. By Friday morning, Diane called. Beacon House Auctions wants the painting. They're talking 6 figures. The estimate came back a week later, $180,000 to $220,000. Arthur looked at the paperwork like it was written in a foreign language. Jackie, that's more than our house cost. Julian stared at his painting, hanging in Diane's gallery under professional lighting. It means Dad's goodbye is worth something, he said quietly. And I realized he wasn't talking about money. Beacon House Auctions, Boston. October 28th, auction date. The specialists examined the painting for 2 hours, took photographs, measured the layers with some kind of specialized equipment. This is museum-quality work, the lead specialist told us. The narrative alone will drive bidding. Autistic teen artist, painting his father's death, synesthesia confirmed by neurologists. But the technique itself is extraordinary. We're very confident in the $180,000 to $220,000 range. Lot number 52. Contemporary Art Evening Sale. I signed the consignment paperwork. Arthur squeezed my shoulder. Jackie, even at the low estimate, that's life-changing money. I thought about the medical debt, about the cottage Arthur and Rosemary had given us, about the 6 years of showing up every single day without hesitation. Yes, I said. It is. I already knew exactly what I was going to do with it. 6 a.m. October 28th, Julian refused to get out of bed. I can't go. Too many people, too much noise. You go. Tell me what color the room is after. I'd expected this. PDA plus a room full of 300 strangers? Impossible. Iris will stay with you, I said. We'll FaceTime you when it's over. Arthur wore the same suit jacket from the prize ceremony. Rosemary wore a navy dress with a pearl necklace, real pearls, from her mother, the only valuable thing she owned. We left at noon for the 3-hour drive to Boston. Beacon House Auctions, 156 Newberry Street. The auction started at 7 p.m. Julian's lot was scheduled for 8:20. I was so anxious I couldn't eat. Rosemary held my hand in the car. Whatever happens, we're proud of him, of you. This is already a miracle. I thought about the email from my father. Demonstrate resilience. I thought about the museum encounter. My mother turning away. And I thought, you have no idea what's coming. 340 registered bidders, some in person, seated in rows of chairs, others on phone lines, others bidding online through the platform. We had seats in the 3rd row. I could see the painting on stage, lit by an 800-watt spotlight, the layers of color glowing. At 8:17, 3 minutes early, the auctioneer stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, lot number 52, What Goodbye Looks Like by Julian Bennett, mixed media on canvas, 72 by 96 inches, executed 2024. He paused, looked at the room. This is an extraordinary piece. Many of you have read about the artist, a 19-year-old with autism and synesthesia, painting the colors of his father's death. But I encourage you to look past the story and see the work itself. 119 layers. Museum-quality technique. This is a painting that will be studied for decades. The opening was supposed to be 30 seconds. He talked for 3 minutes. The room was completely silent. We'll open at $150,000. A paddle went up immediately. Front row. 150. Do I hear 170? Yes. 170. 190. The bids climbed fast. 200. 220. 250. At 300,000 I stopped breathing. 300. 350. 400. Arthur grabbed my hand. Jackie, this is 450, $500,000. The room erupted in murmurs. The auctioneer didn't pause. Do I hear 550? Yes. Phone bidder 23, 550,000. Online bidder 650,000. I thought the estimate was insane. I thought $180,000 was impossible money. We blew past it in 47 seconds. 800, 900, $1 million to the phone bidder. Rosemary was crying. At 1.2 million, there were only 2 bidders left. Phone bidder 23. Online bidder UA019. The auctioneer slowed down. Let the tension build. 2 million. Do I hear 2-1? Yes. 2.1 million. 2.2. Every bid was another 100,000. 2.5 million. Arthur's hand was shaking in mine. 2.8 million. The online bidder raised to 2.8. The room held its breath. 6 seconds passed. $3 million. Phone bidder 23. Final bid. The auctioneer waited. $3 million, going once. The online bidder's cursor didn't move. Going twice? Still nothing. Sold to phone bidder number 23 for $3 million. The hammer came down at 8:26:34 p.m. The room exploded. Standing ovation, applause, camera flashes. I collapsed into Rosemary's arms. Arthur was shaking so hard he couldn't stand. My phone buzzed at 8:29, Mom calling. I stepped outside onto Newberry Street. Traffic, car horns, the sound of the city. Jacqueline, we just saw the news. We had no idea Julian was... We didn't know he was so talented. We'd love to see you, and him. Can we meet? Her voice was shaking. I looked through the window. Arthur and Rosemary were being photographed with Diane and the auction staff. The people who'd raised this artist. The people who'd shown up, not her. I'll think about it, Mom. I hung up. I didn't call back. November 2nd. Janet Moreau's office in Portland. She walked us through the breakdown. Auction house commission is 25% of the hammer price. That's $750,000. Federal capital gains tax. You'll qualify for the lower rate since Julian's income has been minimal in previous years. That's 15%, approximately $337,000. Maine state tax, 7.15%, approximately $161,000. Total after fees and taxes, $1,752,000. She slid a planning worksheet across the desk. That's life-changing money. What are your priorities? I already knew. First priority, the medical debt. $8,200 remaining balance. 6 years of $100 a month payments, chipping away at what Chris's death had cost. Paid in full. November 3rd. Second priority, something I'd discovered by accident. Arthur and Rosemary's mortgage. They'd told me it was paid off in 2004. That was true. But they'd taken out a home equity loan in 2019, $23,400, to cover property taxes and emergency repairs they couldn't afford. They'd been paying it quietly for 6 years. Never mentioned it. Never asked for help. I paid it off without asking permission. The bank sent the confirmation letter to their address. Congratulations, your loan account number 4721-8839 is now paid in full. Arthur called me, crying. Jackie, you didn't have to... Yes, I did. You gave us a home. I'm giving you freedom. I called a realtor on November 5th. I'm looking for a house, coastal Maine, 3 bedrooms minimum, separate studio building. Budget, up to $750,000. She found it in 2 days. 89 Bayview Terrace, 0.3 miles from number 67, the cottage where we'd rebuilt our lives. Craftsman style, 2,100 square feet. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, built in 2018, and a separate 800 square foot studio building with north-facing windows, climate-controlled, 12-foot ceilings, perfect for painting. It's $680,000, the realtor said. I'll take it. Cash offer. Close as soon as possible. The offer was accepted November 10th. I didn't tell Arthur and Rosemary, not yet. I met with a lawyer on November 11th. I want to establish a scholarship fund, $500,000 initial funding, $25,000 scholarships for autistic students pursuing art, 20 kids per year, in perpetuity. He drew up the paperwork. The Eugene and Dorothy Darnall Foundation for Autism Arts, incorporated November 12th, 501, C3, status pending. Board of Directors, Arthur, Chair, Rosemary, Secretary, me, Treasurer, Iris, Advisor. First scholarships available fall 2026. The foundation would outlive all of us, would give opportunities to kids like Julian for generations, and Arthur and Rosemary's names would be on it forever. Not my parents' names. Not the people who'd built careers on appearing charitable while abandoning their own family. The people who actually showed up. November 15th. Julian had been spending extra hours at Iris's studio, working on something he wouldn't show anyone. This one isn't for selling, he told me. This one is for saying thank you. He wouldn't let me see it, wouldn't let Iris photograph it, just worked in privacy for 6 weeks. On November 20th, Iris texted, "You need to see this. Today. Now." I drove to the studio. Julian was standing in front of his easel, hands covered in paint. The painting was 48 by 60 inches. It wasn't a portrait in any traditional sense. No faces, no bodies, no photographic representation. Just two forms, abstract, overlapping, built from layers of color and texture. Warm browns, soft golds, steady blues, colors that felt like safety, like home. "I don't paint what people look like," Julian explained. "I paint what people feel like. Grandpa and Grandma feel like home." I started crying before he finished the sentence. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Not because of technical skill, though the skill was there, because my son had painted love itself, and he'd painted it for the people who'd earned it. The next day, Dr. Sarah Westbrook from the University of Southern Maine called Diane's gallery. "I saw photos of the portrait. We're launching a new permanent exhibition, Maine Families, Portraits of Care. We'd be honored to acquire this piece as the centerpiece." "It's not for sale," Diane said. "We're not buying, we're asking for donation, full tax deduction, permanent display, the artist's choice." I asked Julian that night, "Can they have it? The painting of Grandpa and Grandma?" He thought for a long time, then nodded. "But the plaque has to say, 'Thank you for being my family.'" Dr. Westbrook agreed immediately. December 14th, 2025, 6 p.m., Maine Families, Portraits of Care opening reception, USM Art Gallery, Gorham Campus. 200 invitations sent. Local press, Maine arts community, education community, academic community. Standard practice. Invite notable figures in the area. My parents' names were on the list. Dr. Westbrook called to confirm. "Should I remove Edmund and Constance Ashford? I know they're your parents, but if this is uncomfortable—" "Leave them on," I said. I wanted them there. I wanted them to see. November 28th, 2025. 6 people crammed into 980 square feet. Me, Julian, Arthur, Rosemary, Iris. Diane from the gallery. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought a pie. 7 people total. Folding table in the dining area, 12 feet by 10 feet. Turkey that cost $43. It was perfect. "Next year we'll have room for a proper table," Rosemary said, setting out mismatched chairs. "But this year, this is perfect." Julian sat between Arthur and Rosemary. Not the grandparents he shared blood with, the ones who'd earned the title. My phone buzzed throughout the day, 9:14 a.m. "Happy Thanksgiving, Jacqueline. Would love to see you." 2:47 p.m. "Please call me." 6:33 p.m. "We made a mistake." 8 texts total, all from my mother, all unread. The last one came at 9:18 p.m. "Your father wants to apologize. Please, give us a chance." I turned my phone off. Arthur noticed, didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand across the table. December 1st, 9 a.m. Arthur, Rosemary, come take a walk with me. We haven't had breakfast yet, Arthur said, confused. Humor me. We walked down Bayview Terrace, .3 miles, temperature 34 degrees, light snow falling. We stopped in front of 89 Bayview. A realtor was waiting on the porch, Jennifer Chen, holding a folder and a set of keys. What's going on? Rosemary asked. Jennifer smiled. Mr. and Mrs. Darnell, welcome to your new home. She handed the keys to Arthur. I don't understand, he said. The house is yours, I said. Paid in full. Deed in your names. This is your home. Rosemary's legs gave out. She sat down on the porch steps, hands over her face. Arthur stared at the keys like they might disappear. Jackie, we can't. This is too much. You gave us a bedroom when you barely had room for yourselves. You gave us 6 years. This isn't too much, this is long overdue. The house was empty. Hardwood floors, updated kitchen, master suite with a walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom. A bedroom for Julian, a guest room, and the studio. 800 square feet, 12-foot ceilings, north-facing windows 8 feet wide, climate control for the paintings, temperature and humidity regulated. Above the studio, a small apartment, 400 square feet, for when Julian needed his own space. Rosemary walked into the studio and broke down completely. We gave you a spare bedroom, she sobbed. You gave us a palace. You gave us a home, I said. This is just a building. In the studio, I pulled out the incorporation papers. There's one more thing. I handed Arthur the letterhead. The Eugene and Dorothy Darnall Foundation for Autism Arts. Board of Directors, Arthur Darnall, Chair. Rosemary Darnall, Secretary. Jacqueline Darnall, Treasurer. Iris Callahan, Advisor. Mission: to provide $25,000 annual scholarships to neurodivergent students pursuing visual arts. 20 scholarships per year, funded in perpetuity. Arthur read his name, then Rosemary's. A mail carrier, he whispered. On a foundation board. No, Dad. A grandfather who showed up every single day. That's who you are. He cried. Rosemary cried. I cried. Julian, when we told him later, organized the foundation paperwork by color and said, now more kids can paint their feelings. That's all he needed to say. University of Southern Maine Art Gallery, Gorham Campus. We arrived at 5:50 p.m. The reception started at 6. Julian stayed home with Iris. 200 people, Mom. That's 200 different noise colors. I'll watch the photos after. I understood. We walked in. Me, Arthur, Rosemary, Diane. My parents were already there. Front row seats. 6:12 p.m. Dr. Westbrook stood in front of the curtain. Tonight we unveil the centerpiece of Maine families, Portraits of Care. This exhibition celebrates the families who show up, who sacrifice, who love without condition. The curtain dropped. The portrait glowed under professional lighting, warm browns, soft golds, steady blues, and below it, a brass plaque, 4 inches by 8 inches. Dr. Westbrook read it aloud. Love in Abstract Form, Portrait of Eugene and Dorothy Darnall, by Julian Bennett, 2025. Thank you for being my family when I needed one most. The room was silent. Then applause, long, sustained applause. I watched my mother's face drain of color. Dr. Westbrook continued, this portrait honors Eugene and Dorothy Darnall, who opened their home and their hearts to their grandson and daughter-in-law during their darkest time. They didn't have much, but they gave everything. This is what family looks like. Not just blood relation, not just obligation, but choice, showing up, sacrifice. She said the word family 7 times in the speech. She said sacrifice 4 times. The cameras panned to Arthur and Rosemary. Arthur in his 30-year-old suit jacket, Rosemary in her handmade dress. My father's colleague, a professor from Bowdoin, leaned over and whispered something to him. Edmund's jaw tightened. At 6:25, Dr. Westbrook made an additional announcement. We're proud to partner with the Eugene and Dorothy Darnall Foundation for Autism Arts. This foundation will provide $25,000 annual scholarships to neurodivergent artists. 20 students per year. Led by Arthur and Dorothy Darnall, this foundation represents the best of Maine values: community, care, and belief in every child's potential. The room stood, applauded. Arthur and Rosemary were crying. My mother was staring at the floor. Her museum, the one where she'd worked for 23 years, was celebrating someone else's family, someone else's sacrifice, someone else's love, and everyone in the room knew exactly who was absent from that story. 7:03 p.m., reception area. I was getting punched when my mother appeared beside me. "Jacqueline, please, can we talk? We didn't know Julian would. We didn't realize." Her hand was trembling. The wine glass shook. I looked at her, really looked at her. She looked old, tired, and for the first time in my life, uncertain. "Didn't realize what, Mom? That he was talented? Or that he was worth your time?" "We made a mistake. You had 6 years to call, 6 years to visit, 6 years to ask how your grandson was doing. You didn't need to know he'd sell a painting for $3 million. You just needed to care." "We do care. You care now, because it's convenient, because people are watching." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, we want to make it right. You can't. That time is gone. But you can leave Arthur and Rosemary alone to enjoy their night. They earned this. You didn't." My father joined us. Professor voice, reasonable gestures. "Jacqueline, I think we can all agree that, emotions aside, we should discuss." "No, Dad. We're done discussing. You discussed yourself out of our lives 6 years ago." "That's not fair." January 12, 2019. Subject: housing request. 247 words explaining why you were too busy to help your widowed daughter and autistic grandson. Signed E. Ashford, Ph.D. No love, no sorry, just your credentials. I pulled out my phone. I kept it. Would you like me to read it aloud? I'm sure your colleagues would find it fascinating. His face went white. 3 of his colleagues were standing 15 feet away, pretending not to listen, but they were listening. Everyone was listening. My parents left at 7:14. I watched them walk out. Didn't feel triumph. Didn't feel vindication. Just peace. Arthur found me by the portrait. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I finally understand. I didn't lose my parents 6 years ago. I just stopped pretending I had them." The reception continued until 9 p.m. 73 people congratulated Arthur and Rosemary personally. Maine Public Radio asked to interview them. They said yes. They talked about Julian for 12 minutes, about his talent, his struggle, his beautiful way of seeing the world. They never mentioned my parents once. They didn't need to. December 25th, 2025. First Christmas in the new house. The living room had 12-foot ceilings. We got a 9-foot tree. Julian organized 14 gifts by wrapping paper color under it, darkest to lightest, left to right. At 10 a.m., he brought 3 small canvases from the studio. "Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, I made you something." 3 abstract paintings, 8 by 10 inches each. Our emotional signatures, he called them. Arthur's was steady blue with brown undertones, reliable, grounded. Rosemary's was warm gold with silver highlights, kind, bright. Mine was green with threads of gray, growing, healing. "These are us," Julian said simply. It was the best gift I'd ever received. 7 people for Christmas dinner. Me, Julian, Arthur, Rosemary, Iris, Diane, Mrs. Patterson with her famous apple pie. We ate at 3 p.m. The dining room table, a real table, 8 feet long, enough room for everyone, was covered in food. I raised my glass at dessert. "This is my family, all of it, right here." Everyone raised their glasses. My phone rang twice during dinner, same number both times. I didn't answer. After dinner, we walked to the studio. Julian had been working on something new, wouldn't show anyone until it was finished. He'd finished it that morning. "This one is called Home," he said. "It's not about a place, it's about people." The painting was 60 by 80 inches, his largest yet. Warm gold, deep blue, steady green, and in the center, barely visible unless you knew to look, 4 figures. Abstract. Overlapping. 2 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. A family. That evening, I found an envelope under the doormat. Handwritten address. No return label. 3 pages. My parents' handwriting. "Jacqueline, we understand if you can never forgive us. We just want you to know. We were wrong. About Chris. About Julian. About you. We're proud of Julian. We're proud of the mother you've become. We're ashamed of the parents we were when you needed us most. We don't expect anything. We just needed you to know." The signature. Mom and Dad. Not E. Ashford, Ph.D. Just Dad. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd answer. Maybe I'd give them a chance to meet their grandson. Maybe. But tonight, I had everyone I needed. 9:47 p.m. I tucked Julian into bed, something I hadn't done in 3 years. He usually hated touch. But tonight, he didn't pull away. "Mom, I know Dad can't see this house, but I think he can see the colors from wherever he is. And I think he's happy we found Grandma and Grandpa." "I think so too, baby. They're not the ones we got born with, but they're the ones we get to keep." He closed his eyes. I sat there for a long time, watching him breathe, thinking about how far we'd come. 10:23 p.m. I stood on the front porch of 89 Bayview, looking down the street at number 67, the cottage where we'd rebuilt our lives in 980 square feet. New renters were moving in January. A young couple. I hoped they'd be as happy there as we'd been. My phone buzzed. Text from Iris. "Collector wants to commission Julian, offering $500,000. Should I tell them no?" I smiled. Some things weren't for sale. I typed back. "Tell them thank you, but Julian's schedule is full." Then I looked up at the stars. Clear winter sky. 28 degrees. Somewhere Chris was watching. I liked to think he could see the colors too. Blood doesn't make a family. Showing up does. Staying does. Loving when it's hard does. We'd made it. Not in spite of the hard parts. Because of the people who stayed through them. Julian painted one more piece that year. He titled it Home. It was the color of belonging, warm and steady and true, blues and golds and greens layered until they glowed. This time, we didn't sell it. We hung it in the living room of 89 Bayview, where everyone who entered could see it, because some things you keep forever. Not because they're worth money, but because they're worth everything. If this story touched you, leave a comment sharing about someone who showed up for you when your own family didn't. Sometimes the family we choose is the family that saves us.